This is the How Design Live podcast, hosted by programming partner Elise Bennin, national speaker, author of 7 business books for creative professionals, and founder of marketing-mentor.com. Listen to her lively conversations with past and future How Design Live speakers about the business of creativity and creativity in business. Here's Elise Bennin.
Today's podcast episode is a conversation with Shutterstock's creative director, Terrence Morash, about the latest global trends for design, culture, music, and video, and how they're determined in this data-driven world. Shutterstock, I imagine you know, is one of the leading resources for licensed images, music, video footage, and more. And we really look forward to seeing them at How Design Live in Chicago this year, which is May 2nd through 6th, 2017. I hope to see you there too. But in the meantime, listen and learn. Hello, Terrence. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me, and please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Terrence Morash. I'm the creative director here at Shutterstock. And as many of your listeners know, Shutterstock is a global company that really helps provide all the assets that businesses, agencies, media organizations, designers, everything that people need in order to generate impactful communications.
And we're going to talk about the creative trends for 2017. But before we launch into that, just kind of riffing off of what you just said, it seems to me that more and more assets are needed these days because of social media, because of what exactly? Is that what's happening? Is what I'm noticing actually happening? And tell me why.
I think you have hit the nail on the head to some degree, right? What we've really seen over the recent years is a culture that's getting more and more visual. And not just that, but also the number of people who are using visuals to tell their stories has been growing exponentially. 10 years ago, it might have just been a designer who was putting together a brochure or an advertisement. But now you have individuals kind of building their own personal brands using Instagram, using Pinterest, using Twitter. And the appetite for more and more imagery is there. At the same time, I think that we're also seeing this real need for more diversity in imagery, that the kind of assets that people are looking for, the quality of the assets, what those assets represent, that demand is growing so much more every single day, to the point that our collection, we're over 100 million images now. We have over 5 million video clips in the collection, 160,000 contributors. All these things lead to more and more choice for the people who are using our services.
And how long has Shutterstock been around?
It's been about 13 years now, I believe. Yes, that's right. So 13 years now. And what's really interesting when you look at the history of the company, you think about when it started, that here was John Oringer starting this company that was trying to solve a need of providing really easy to get, easy to search for, to find, to download royalty-free imagery. That really satisfied a tremendous need 13 years ago. But then you fast forward to today, and we really see the company has changed a lot. Yes, we still offer that kind of core offering of all these royalty-free images. But at the same time, our customer base has really grown dramatically. It's no longer just the creatives of the world, the agencies of the world. But we really are catering to the small businesses, the social media community managers. So the needs to provide tools such as our Shutterstock editor tool has become that much more important, and even generating actionable intelligence, such as these creative trends, right? Taking some of that data that we have every day and really offering it back to our customers in a way that they can then have that be infused into their ongoing work.
Interesting. And the audience for the How Design Live podcast, as you know, is for the most part designers. And so we need to speak to them, not so much to the small business owners, but I guess one question that comes to my mind as I'm thinking on behalf of the designers is, are you also always open to and looking for their work to be contributed to the Shutterstock library?
Absolutely. It's actually amazing how many of the designers I run into are also contributors, including people who are designers here at Shutterstock. I know that they're kind of generating some of those really interesting vector patterns you see on there, or photography. Certainly the ongoing technology advances with smartphones have really enabled anybody to produce high quality imagery that can be used for a variety of purposes, including print, which was always a big barrier when digital first came out. So now we always do encourage a lot of the designers out there who are our customers as far as downloading content to be also contributing content at the same time.
And so, is there anything in particular you're low on or looking for that the designers could aim to contribute?
The best thing actually for them is to look at that creative trends report. So that's one of the fun things about it. It's really not just about telling designers what they should be designing for in the future, but it really becomes a great tool for our contributors to understand what the demand is going to be, 3 months, 6 months from now. So it kind of gives you a little bit of glimpse into the future. And we actually saw a little bit with the trends last year where we had the trend flat lie, which is, everyone kind of understands this visual style where it's sort of looking straight down on something, things organized neatly. I think it's also known as knolling. And we saw that sort of really cause a spike in some of our contributed content that represented that particular category, and also introduced some more video content that was related to that. So in this year's trends, we have what's called top view from the video content side, which is almost an extension of that flat lay approach, but incorporating this sort of DIY how-to tutorial aspect where someone's hands might be in the view and the camera has this POV of the hands doing something, whether it's making a cake, assembling something. Really quite a nice, interesting extension, and again, illustrating how it really informed the contributors of what to provide next.
Excellent. All right. So then tell us more about the trends.
Sure. So basically what the trends are, this is the 6th year we've been doing it. And what it does is it's not just showing us what the popular downloads are for the year. I think that's mildly interesting. What we find really interesting is when you start looking at what is trending year over year. So what do I mean by that, right? So we have billions of downloads and searches every single year on the website. We can then see what keywords are being searched for more often one year over the other. So we can really start to identify what is starting to spike that we can then put together into our report and inform our customers of, hey, these are the things that we're seeing are going to become popular very much later on. And a lot of those searches, of course, are being driven by a lot of the creatives that are out there. All those creatives who are at agencies who are working on their fall campaigns right now, their summer campaigns, even to some extent winter campaigns, right? All that information, all that work that's going on right now is starting to help inform the rest of the community about what's going to be popular later on in 2017.
So what are some of those top keywords that people are searching for?
Well, what we've done is really not necessarily put it down to the keywords, because we're really trying to identify how these keywords all relate to each other. But we have identified a number of trends. So what we start with is our global trends. So these are the ones that across the board are really starting to surface. The biggest one that we saw this year is a trend for white texture. So this is essentially, you can imagine textured paper, nice detailed sort of patterns on a white background, things that a designer can easily incorporate into their work to add that nice kind of physical, almost a little bit more of like that artisanal kind of feel to their assets. I'm actually seeing it a little bit in some of the work that MailChimp has been doing. You'll see how their website has really evolved from being just about material design, but also now incorporating this somewhat dimensionality into it. In fact, another trend that they're representing is also halftones. So that's another one of the trends that we're seeing. So that dot pattern you see in newspapers and print publications is really starting to become very popular again in designs. On the other side of side of the fence, we have on the digital trends, we have a heads-up display. So having kind of the dashboard view of data right there front and center integrated into someone's physical environment, like you see in race cars, for example, on their dashboards and their windscreens. And then also, of course, emojis. We can't get away from emojis. It was actually a trend 2 years ago, went away last year, and then came back really strong again this year. We think a lot of that was driven by some of the work that was being done by creatives. Certainly Pepsi came out with their Pepsi emoji campaign last summer, where they had emojis on Pepsi cans, etc. And I think that sort of mainstreaming of emojis really brought it back into everybody's attention. And it's, of course, certainly driven by the social media channels like Snapchat and Instagram, etc.
Are you seeing virtual reality and the rise of virtual reality affecting these trends? And if so, in which of them?
Absolutely. We actually are seeing virtual reality specifically in our cultural trends. So our cultural trends, really, there's quite a division between a nostalgic sense of imagery and content versus the future. And on the future side of things, virtual reality remains a really strong trend. So as people are really exploring how, again, technology is and augmented reality is really getting integrated into our lives. And what's interesting this year, though, is whereas last year virtual reality was present and there was really the promise of technology, the one big shift we're starting to see this year is it's balanced off by a little bit of the threat of technology, right? So one of our other trends we're seeing is cybersecurity. So all of a sudden, people are really thinking about this integration of technology into our lives has trade-offs, right? It's not just about all the positive aspects of it, but also the things that we have to worry about. What are those personal details that we need to be aware of losing track of? These are the things that are kind of hot on people's minds.
What other trends do you have? I noticed as I was looking through them, there are lots of different categories.
There are, yeah. So staying in the cultural trends, I think the nostalgia trend is always very interesting. What we're really seeing is that kind of revisiting iconography of past decades, thinking interesting patterns, vintage charm, things that reference childhood. And what you start to see, you start to look for these trends in pop culture. And the one that really jumped out to me, of course, was Stranger Things, the Netflix series, where here's this show that it's not about the 80s, but it has this 1980s sort of aesthetic that's infused into the entire production, from the sort of iconic titling to the sets themselves. It really does get represented this sense of nostalgia.
And would you say that there's always a nostalgic trend of one sort or another? It's just the decade that changes?
I think you have definitely seen that. What's interesting though is I feel like it's shifted a bit because I think sometimes that nostalgic trend is purely from an aesthetic standpoint, where I think back to when sort of 70s and not even 90s trend most recently was really getting popular again. I think it was about those like pop colors and how fun it was. And it was almost like a caricature of what that time was. But now I feel like it's a little bit more of a nuance. It's almost a little bit more thoughtful, where I feel like our people are kind of yearning for a time when it was maybe simpler. And maybe that's the result of some of the kind of political discourse that's been going on over the past year.
Mm-hmm. Keep going. Tell us more.
Sure. We also have a section on design trends. So we're seeing a real difference in design trends as well. So from nature versus technology. On the nature side of things, nothing really surprising there. Organic texture, which to some extent reflects that global trend of white texture. This sense of natural patterns. You imagine the wood grain of a kind of freshly cut log. Things like that are really starting to trend. But then on the other side of the fence, again, we have technology, the kind of polar opposite. And even more interesting when we start talking about that trend of the darkness kind of creeping into how technology is in our lives. One of those trends within technology from a design standpoint is glitch. And we represent glitch by sort of that imperfection of digital technology. So when you're looking at a screen and not all the pixels are lighting up, or you're seeing banding in a video, or it's that white noise, that static you see on the television. Those are the kind of aesthetic elements that we're starting to see come through, and not just imagery, but also some of the footage trends that we're coming across. One of the other sections of our trend report are visual trends around the world. So while we do have these global trends, we also like to really dig down and identify are there any trends in specific parts of the world that are really standing out to us. And for me, this becomes really fascinating, especially from a design standpoint, where you're starting to work internationally, because it does help you inform you what might resonate in one part of the world versus the other. So when you look at some of those trends, it's actually pretty fascinating, right? So you look at Canada, for example, and we're seeing clean energy as a trend there, which doesn't seem like a really surprising sort of trend. Things like solar power and wind power, et cetera. But at the same time, there are trends out there that we can't identify. We can't understand why this is trending. So, for example, in the United States, we're seeing jalapeno. No idea why. So it's really interesting to see this data to try to understand it. If anybody knows why jalapeno is popular in the United States, please do share, because we would love to know.
What do you mean jalapeno? I haven't seen jalapeno. How does it manifest?
So again, this is just a prediction, right? So our data is telling us that jalapeno is a trending term for 2017. So who knows? There may be some amazing jalapeno campaign that's coming out this summer that's really going to have this all make sense. I think we just have to kind of stay tuned and find out.
But that actually reminded me of a question, which is who comes up with the labels or the names for these trends? And not so much even who, but how? What is the process for deciding what to call them? Like glitch, you said. How did that come about?
That's a great question. It really becomes a collaborative effort between a lot of different parties here at Shutterstock. So everything from our design team, our content team, our communications team, our analytics team, everybody really kind of pulling together, looking at that raw data, that first data set that we start to see, and really trying to bucket it into trends that make sense together. And I think from there, we start doing different research to try to put a name to those different trends so that people can identify it. A lot of times you can visually identify a trend such as flat lay, but until you have a phrase to explain what that means, it's just not represented, or it's hard to really talk about it. So what we try to do is really look for that kind of perfect word that's going to explain what we're seeing. Perhaps it's also paid off by just some research, like what are people talking about on the designer boards that are out there, the different forums. What are some of the different trends? Are any of those reflective of what we're seeing in the data so that we can help make this a real actionable report for people?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about like music and video trends? What do you see there?
Also really interesting. So on the video trend side, we actually saw one of the continuations of the 2016 trends of wanderlust. So, we've certainly seen, and I think it's with that rise of sort of Instagram and how popular that's become, this sense that people are really yearning for experiences. Technology is amazing, and it's really opened up the world to us. But at the same time, I think there's a huge portion of our population that really looks to technology of opening up the world for them. So going to explore other places. In a more authentic way. And you start to see this sort of manifest itself into something like Airbnb's campaign, Live There, where they're not just selling some glitzy resort on a beach somewhere, but what they're trying to sell is more authentic experience of life in another part of the world. That they want you to go to Paris, but not just go to the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. They want you to experience power. They want you to live there. They want you to go to that little market that's next door to an apartment and really kind of get yourself ingrained into the culture there. And I think that is one of those trends that we're seeing in a lot of the footage that's coming through. At the same time, we're seeing top view, as I mentioned earlier, but also mobile office. So it's almost that responsible version of Wanderlust where technology, again, is enabling us to take our workplace to places we never could have been before, right? It's no longer required that everybody's sitting in a cubicle in some gigantic office building somewhere. Now people can work from the road, can really kind of get out there. And of course, immersive technology. No surprise there, right? So you can imagine footage that represents people with augmented reality glasses on, people playing Pokemon Go. All these things are kind of in hot demand, and we're going to see a lot more of it in 2017. So on the music side of things, we're seeing three major trends: chill hop, atmospheric, and high octane. And they're really all quite different. Chill hop being very sort of toned down, kind of a little bit more serene, quiet music, going all the way up to high octane, which almost can feel foreboding, kind of really rich beats and kind of strong, high energy. But when you look at the three of them as a whole, and I always like to compare it versus past trends, compared to last year, the 2016 trends felt still very kind of poppy, very happy, almost a continuation of all those Apple-esque commercials that we've seen with ukuleles and xylophones that are just kind of fun and carefree. This year, I feel like the trends are not necessarily carefree. There's definitely more this sense of being ponderous and perhaps even foreboding in certain cases.
All right. Did we miss any trends, Terrence?
I think the only one we didn't get to was were social trends. So on the social media side of things, we always try to social trends, social media.
Okay.
On the social media side of things, we almost saw a little continuation of what we've been seeing in the past, of what's been performing really well or what people are really looking to do. And that's that kind of beautiful aesthetic that you see represented in Instagram, especially when it comes to nature imagery. So things such as a beautiful landscape shot or, some snow falling through the trees. But one of the big shifts that we're seeing this year is also the introduction of extreme weather. So while we're still very much focused on kind of gorgeous light, wonderful composition and nature, now we're starting to see this kind of spike in searches for things such as tornadoes or waves crashing against a lighthouse. Really dramatic imagery that I think shows the power of nature. So we end up having this real balance of kind of the escape of nature and how you can just kind of lose yourself and get away from everything in the world, to a respect for what nature can cause as well.
Interesting. Okay. So where can people see the images and the media that go along with these trends? And is that how they should consume them, or is there more that they can do with them?
No, I think that's a great place to start, right? Go to shutterstock.com/trends, where you can see our infographic. We sort of have an interactive infographic in there where you can kind of play around, see what's spiking, and then also see some collections that we've put together representing each one of those trends, so we can help illustrate exactly what we mean by what we're seeing in the data.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing this. I know that we had another podcast from 2016, so maybe we'll link to that also so people can hear the before and after. But I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Oh, thank you very much. This was great. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the How Design Live podcast with Elise Benin, the programming partner for How Design Live. You can subscribe to this podcast in the iTunes Store or on SoundCloud. We hope you found it both inspiring and practical, like everything How Live. And we hope to see you at the next How Design Live, May 2nd through 6th, 2017 in Chicago. Get all the details at www.howdesignlive.com.